Hey, in this video, I'm going to be giving you my 7 British podcast recommendations that will help you with your IELTS listening. So, what is a podcast? Well, a podcast is a little bit like Netflix, but for your ears. They are pre-recorded, often radio-styled shows. That's where they came from. In the UK and the US, they're extremely popular, and they can be super useful for practicing English in situations where usually you don't have the opportunity to study. This might be being on the bus, doing the washing up, or doing the chores at home. It's a great way to get extra English in, and it's fun. You can find podcasts in lots of different places. You probably already know about some of these, the most popular being Spotify, probably Apple Music, and also Podcast Addict, which is my favourite because you can select the language you want to search for. Hey, my name is Simon from My IELTS Boost, and today I'm going to give you podcast recommendations from 6 different genres, and they will all be graded by their difficulty and by your band score aim. So the different genres will be science and psychology, English language and learning. We will also have history, lectures, crime and mystery, and finally my favourite chat shows. So let's take a look. First of all, science. This genre is obviously great for those preparing for the academic IELTS, but also for those preparing the general. My first recommendation is the BBC podcast, All in the Mind. Now, this is a podcast about psychology, but actually it's designed for people who don't necessarily know a lot about the topic. I would rate this podcast at 5 out of 10 on the difficulty level. So it's probably perfect for someone aiming to get a band 6 or a band 6.5 and upwards. Secondly, there's the BBC podcast Inside Science. Again, brilliant for academic IELTS takers. And this one's a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more difficult. So I'd probably give this a 6 or 7 out of 10 for difficulty, and perfect for those students aiming for a band 7 and above. History. So this one is the BBC History Extra podcast. Here you'll find a range of different topics, and the difficulty level is about a 7 out of 10. Ideal for those people aiming for a band 7, 7.5, maybe an 8. Mystery and crime. Now this actually comes from the last podcast, BBC History Extra, particularly the episode Iceland Murder Mystery. English learning. So this podcast is called The English We Speak. Each short 3-minute episode introduces an idiomatic expression or interesting piece of vocabulary. Although this podcast isn't particularly difficult, maybe a 4 out of 10 on the difficulty scale, it's useful for all levels of students, as we all know how important it is to have a variety of vocabulary and also to use idiomatic expressions in the exam. Lectures and talks. Now, I couldn't make this list without talking about the TED Talk podcast. Many of you probably already know the videos, but their podcasts are equally as fascinating, talking about a range of different topics. Chat shows. So this is my favourite genre. I listen to these podcasts every week. This podcast is called Desert Island Discs. I would give this podcast a difficulty rating of 7 to 8 out of 10, and it depends on the guest of the week. Each week there is a guest who talks about his life. This is usually a famous person who uses music to talk about how they came to be the person they are today. My favourite episode would be the Ed Sheeran episode, where he talks about where he came from and how he came to be the person he is today, and why these 8 songs are so important to him. So this podcast is about people's lives, told through music. And the second of the chat show recommendations is the Louis Theroux Lockdown series. Here, Louis, a famous journalist from the UK, gets in contact with different interesting and famous people from around the world and interviews them about their experience during lockdown. Although sometimes the content here can be heavy, it's also often comical and done in a really interesting way. The difficulty of this podcast is probably, again, a 7 or an 8 out of 10, depending on the guest of the week. So there are my 7 top podcast recommendations from the UK. So now you know how to improve your listening for IELTS at home and for free. Well, if you also would like the chance to practice speaking for your IELTS for free from home, then join me this Saturday, the 30th of January, for my free IELTS speaking club, where you'll have the opportunity to speak with other students from all over the world, and I will be giving you some tips and tricks for IELTS success. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a share. It helps me a lot. And also, I'd love to know, well, what podcast have I missed out? If I have missed any podcast that you know about that I don't, or a podcast that you just love and want to recommend to other English learners, please leave it down in the comments. Thanks very much, and see you again soon.